Why is it that some ball pythons will sell so quickly that essentially, as soon as the animal crawls out of the egg, there are multiple different people fighting to give the breeder money for that specific snake? While there are also ball pythons on Morph Market that can sit there for years and years and years with essentially no interest. The easy answer is that there's huge differences in demand for various different ball pythons and really everything, but that answer doesn't really get into the nuance and the realities that are at play, and it doesn't give newer breeders any insight on how to make those animals that are going to sell right out of the egg and avoid the animals that are going to sit on Morph Market for years and years and years and nobody wants them. So, for this week, we are going to be talking about ball python breeding strategies, specifically through the lens of trying to make quick sales later on. My name's Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and let's get to it. To kick off this video, I want to go over the story of how we originally got into the Sunset Project because I feel that it is a really good example to illustrate all of the points that we are going to be talking about. So we originally bought into the Sunset Project in late 2020, I believe that it was. I think it was October when we bought our very first Sunset male. And at the time, there was a lot of people getting into the hobby through the COVID boom. And as those people were getting into the hobby, there was a lot of talk at the time that we really needed to focus on recessive genes as new breeders. And we were a new breeder at this point in time. So while everybody else was buying into clown, into pied, into desert ghost, we felt that if we bought those animals at that point in time, which we did buy animals like that at that point in time, but if we really focused on those animals and that's all we did, what would end up happening is by the time that those animals were big enough to produce babies, that we would be producing the same babies that everybody else was producing. And when all of those other people who got in at the exact same point in time that we did were now looking to upgrade their collection and go to the next level, they weren't looking to buy a clown or a combo clown or a desert ghost. They were going to be looking at the next tier up. So what we thought was, what if instead of going and buying really heavy into clown or into desert ghost or into pied, we looked at that next tier up. And at the time, the genes that really stood out to us were Puzzle, Monsoon, and Sunset. And based off of the market at the time, Monsoon prices were super high, and you really couldn't even buy a visual Monsoon. There was none that were listed available. You could buy hets, but I don't even know if there was any female hets available, and we didn't want to worry about trying to play the pos het game by getting a het Monsoon male and then trying to hold back a bunch of 50% het Monsoon females. Now, at that point in time, genetic testing wasn't around yet, but at this point in time, that is a much more viable breeding strategy because you could always take a het male, breed it to a bunch of animals, make 50% pos hets, and then send the sheds into RGI in order to figure out which ones were actually het, but at that point in time wasn't something that we even considered. So that kind of crossed Monsoon off of the list. And then when we are looking at Puzzle, I think that Puzzle is amazing, and honestly it's one of my favorite morphs right now, but I didn't feel that it looked that wildly different from other morphs. So I felt that it just changed the pattern a little bit. And while that is really good for combos, at that point in time, we didn't really understand that aspect of the breeding hobby. And when it came to Sunset, I had seen the absolutely beautiful cinnamon inchy sunsets that Brian Cusco had made, and it made me really like that project. So we were able to buy a visual Sunset male at that point in time, and that is really what got us interested in the Sunset Project. But it wasn't all about the appearance. When we're looking at it from a business angle, the guess that I was making, because it was a guess, we didn't know, was that if we bought a Sunset male and we are able to make het Sunset animals and potentially double het Sunset animals, and maybe if we're able to get like a female or two as well, some visual Sunsets, by the time that we would be able to produce animals from that boy, those types of animals would be the ones that the other people who got into the breeding hobby at the exact same time of us would be wanting, because they would want to upgrade from just working clown or just working pied or just working desert ghost, and that they would be looking at Puzzle, Monsoon, and Sunset as that next tier up. So we ended up buying that male. He bred for us the first season he was able to go. He sired a bunch of clutches for us, and we got very, very lucky. And with that, the prices for the Sunset project held really steady. In fact, they actually went up like almost a double from when we bought our boy until they were at the height of COVID. And with that, it was such a good move. It was such a strong project for us to get in. And it really made it where even to today, when we hatch out Sunset clutches, pretty much the entire clutch gets sold immediately, easily within a month of posting it, but oftentimes they will sell before they ever even hit Morph Market. And it's not necessarily that Sunsets are just the hottest thing ever. It is about the idea of producing the right animal, the right solution for the right person at the right time. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The very first thing when you are trying to understand what makes a good, strong breeding strategy in terms of fast sales that are going to sell for a considerable amount of money is what problem are you trying to solve in your target customer. It's one thing to make beautiful animals, and that is a huge part of the hobby. But from a business angle, you need to be able to do more than just simply make beautiful snakes. Instead, you have to understand who is potentially going to buy this animal. So if we're looking at it from the Sunset story that we just said, our essentially target customer was going to be the other people who got into breeding ball pythons at the exact point in time that we did, but we weren't going to try to sell to them now. Instead, we were going to look at what are they most likely going to want to buy 3 years from now. And this was a guess. You can be wrong on this, but if you are right, what will end up happening is that you have the right product, the right solution at the right time, and therefore it makes it a no-brainer to buy from you. But there are, in my opinion, 5 different problems that ball python breeders are trying to solve when they pick up new animals. The very first problem that they're trying to solve is that the odds to hit the animals that they want to hit are so low that they are looking to buy something to improve their odds. When it comes to the multi-recessive world of the ball python breeding hobby, it doesn't take much before it is a 1 in 16, 1 in 32, 1 in 64 chance that you are going to hit the exact animal that you want. And if you are used to pairing double het to double het, you are probably aware that you are not very likely to get the desired outcome. But instead, if you had a visual het to a double het, it doubles your chances of hitting what you want. And beyond the fact of it doubling your chances to hit the best animal, it also means that all of your byproduct animals are considerably better. So I think that when it comes to the future of the ball python breeding hobby, finding ways that you can produce animals that are drastically going to improve the odds for that given project is going to be key. So if you are going to be working, let's say the DG Clown project, you need to be able to make clown het DGs and DG het clowns in order to create the animals that have the potential to be in demand once you are able to produce them. But realistically, given how fast the hobby is moving, I don't think that just simply making a clown het DG is enough. You need to be able to bring other genes into it, and that leads us into our second point. When it comes to working ball python breeding projects, they take years, 5, 10, 15 years, depending on exactly what you're trying to do. And when you are working these multi-recessive projects, it takes so much time to bring new genes into them that if you are able to bring new genes into, let's say, the DG Clown project right away, it is going to mean that anybody else who's already in the DG Clown project might want to buy those animals because let's say that you created a stranger red striped yellow belly double het DG Clown female. And let's say that you hit the visual version, the clown het DG version of that, so you are going to release the double het for sale. Somebody else who is in the DG Clown project might see that animal, and they might even be able to make that animal with enough breeding generations on their own, Or they could say that if they picked up that combo double het girl, that will save them years of time and effort trying to work all of those genes into their DG clown project, that because of that time-saving aspect, that might be an animal that they want to pick up. So I think that whether you are looking at the odds angle or simply trying to save other people time in order to hit their goals, both of these are viable ways to make those animals that will sell right out of the egg. The third problem that breeders are trying to solve when they're picking up new animals is that they want to work a new project, but they don't have any animals in it right now, so they have to buy in. So if you want to work the sunset project, you need either a sunset animal or a het sunset animal, at least one, in order to get into it. So with this, if you are going to try to make animals that can get people really, really excited and buy them out of the egg, and you're trying to do it from the angle of this is a newer project, realistically, you need to be finding projects that have a decent amount of hype, because that's going to get people to buy into it, and there isn't a ton of other people in that project at that point in time. And the reason why this is really important is even though you might hatch out a clutch of, in this case, sunsets, you might have some amazing animals if the customer believes that there are a bunch of other people who are working that project and somebody else might get a better animal or somebody else might have a better price. They'll just wait for somebody else to hit that animal and then they'll buy it then. And if you are one of the only people in that project and they know that if they don't buy that animal from you when they see it coming out of the egg, it's very, very likely that they're not going to be able to buy an animal in that project for at least another year. That is a situation where it becomes very, very easy to sell animals out of the egg because the project has a lot of hype and it's so new that there isn't very much competition, so people are trying to snatch up whatever can become available. The fourth problem that breeders are trying to solve when they're picking up animals is that they feel that they have tapped out at the level of animals they are able to produce. So as you get into the hobby, we've talked about multiple times of there being pet level animals, entry level breeder animals, enthusiast level breeder animals, and leading edge animals. So if you start off in the hobby making pet level animals and eventually you decide that you want to really move up, and instead of making $300 to $500 snakes, you want to start making $3,000 to $5,000 snakes. In this realm, it's pretty much a necessity that you have to invest in higher end animals in order to make those $3,000 to $5,000 snakes. So with this, people will make purchases with the intention of trying to move them up in the tiers of customers that they can attract. So when this becomes a motivating factor for making a purchase, it is really, really important that people perceive that the animal that you are selling, the animal that hatched out that they're interested in, not only is it going to hold its value fairly well, but its babies are going to hold their value very well, because they know if they buy it right out of the egg, it's going to take them at least a year, if it's a male, to start breeding it, and then maybe 6 to 12 months after that before they start getting eggs. In this situation, it's super important to be making animals that are as best as you can possibly make them, because if there is a ton of other people who are making the exact same animal as you, they know that there is so much other competition that by the time they produce animals with that project, that everybody else has produced a ton too and the prices will have fallen. So if you are able to make, let's say, the first double recessive project, or the first double recessive with an extra gene or extra 2 genes in it, those are going to be the types of animals that sell really, really fast, because they know, the customer knows, that those animals are going to hold their value for the long term. The last problem that customers try to solve when they are buying an animal is that they want to be able to support the breeders that they like and that they trust and that they have previously done business with. And because of this, it isn't necessarily going to mean that just because you really, really like a breeder, you're going to go out and buy an animal from them just cause. But if that breeder has an animal that fits into your project and it's the right price, it's very likely you're going to buy from that breeder versus somebody else, even if that breeder has it for a little bit more money. So by being able to foster relationships with people and connections to people to make sure that people like you, so that way they want to support you later on, this might potentially be the difference between whether or not you have it listed on Morph Market for a year before it finds the exact right buyer, and somebody who you already know and already supports you sees it crawl out of the egg and they want to buy that animal from you before it ever gets listed because they already wanted to show you support. Now that we've talked about the problems that we can try to solve as breeders, what we want to do now is look at and analyze how scarcity and competition affects the speed at which things sell. So, scarcity. This is the idea that if there is a limited amount of something, that once it is sold, it's gone, and that if you don't buy it right then and there, you are going to be missing out. FOMO, fear of missing out, all of these things deal with the idea of scarcity. And there is a misconception that I think that people have where they think that if something is scarce, it automatically is going to sell quickly, but that's not necessarily true. That has to deal with an imbalance between the demand for a product and the available supply of it. So if you have a high demand and it's scarce, it will definitely sell quickly and it will definitely sell for a lot of money. But if there is a low demand for that product because nobody knows about it or nobody has a lot of hype around that product and it's scarce, even though it's the only one in the world, it might still sit on Morph Market for a year, and even then, if it finally sells, it's probably not going to sell for a super high value. When it comes to trying to make the really fast sales out of the egg, I think it's super important to do everything you can as a breeder to help hype the projects that you are working and help establish a demand so that way other people are excited about it and other people are interested in those projects, so that way there is a perception that there is so much interest, there is so much hype for this project that when you do produce babies and you only hit, let's say, one animal that's going to be available, you have multiple different people trying to pounce on that one animal at once, thus creating the really, really fast sales. And if you're not doing anything to market your projects and to push your projects, essentially what's going on is you are hoping that other people do the work for you and that you can just reap the rewards that they have sown. And in my opinion, this is not a good way to try to establish a business because you are essentially putting the fate of your sales in other people's hands. And oftentimes what happens when people do this and they don't sell their animals quickly, they blame the market. They say the ball python market is dead, nobody wants to buy ball pythons, even though they barely put in any effort to market their brand and to market their projects. So therefore, there is no reason for people to buy that specific animal from them really at any point in time because they didn't put in the work. The last thing that we want to talk about is competition, and it's such an interesting thing when we look at the ball python hobby. So as we move up in the tiers of the ball python breeding world, and we are looking from $300 to $500 animals up to $1,000 to $2,000 up to the $5,000 plus animals, it is more and more likely that the person buying the more expensive animal is another breeder. So that means if we sell somebody a sunset today, at some point in time, they are also going to be producing sunsets, which means that they are going to be competing with us for the exact same customers at some point in the future. So with this, it is super, super important that you are creating unique situations about your brand, about your animals, about yourself that let you stand out from everybody else in the project. Because it's one thing to be early in a project, and you can do very, very well if you get in early on an in-demand project, especially if it blows up later on. But when it gets to the point that pretty much everybody has the project, the way that you are able to really get your animals to sell first and for the highest amounts of money is to be seen as one of the best in that project. And while that can mean that you are hitting some of the best combos, it might also be that you promote the project more than anybody else. Or it might mean that you have so many different relationships throughout the hobby that when people want to buy the project, even though you might not have the most leading edge animals, they want to support you specifically. So if you're not doing things like this to promote the projects that you are in, to build relationships throughout the community, it's very likely that if it gets into a crowded marketplace where there's a bunch of people working the same genes, very likely the only ways you are going to be able to sell your animals is if you undercut other people so that way you have the cheapest price. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think it's a sustainable thing in order to have a healthy long-term breeding business. Before we end the video, I want to give a little bit of what I think the market is heading in the future if you are getting in right now in 2024. And at the high-end side, I think that there are two major directions. One is combo multi-recessive animals, because these combo multi-recessive animals inherently are very, very difficult to hit, so there is going to be a low supply of them. Also, it seems that every single breeder is working these double, triples, sometimes even quad projects, and with that, there is going to be a lot of situations where people want to work other recessives into their current double project or triple project, or they want to work other genes into the exact same double, triple, or quad project that they are already pairing animals for. So this is one realm, and I think that again, you want to try to make things that are improving the odds for people, working a bunch of extra genes into it all at once, that you are doing things that make people like you and want to support you specifically. I think the other direction besides multi-recessives is that there are a few genes that are coming out right now that have a ton of hype and very, very high price tags. These are things like Cosmos, like Bambino, like Mimic, and there might be other ones, but I do think that these are catching a lot of interest right now. But again, their price tags are super, super high. The reason why I think that projects like these are poised to do well right now is that if somebody wants to buy a Cosmos, they don't have a choice. They have to buy from, in this case, Justin or Brittany or Ralph, or there's a few other people who've bought into that project already. So if somebody wants to buy into Cosmos, they're forced to go to a very, very small amount of people, and because of this, it is very, very likely that somebody who gets into the project literally right now is probably going to do well later on. But as more and more interest gets into these projects, and as more and more competition gets developed in their spheres, it is going to create a situation where their prices are going to drop very, very quickly. And when that ends up happening, it is so imperative that you are being seen as one of the leaders of the project, that you are creating leading edge animals in some kind of fashion. So I think that either avenue, or realistically both avenues, are going to be things that in 2 to 3 years are going to be dominating the entire high-end side of the reptile breeding space. Anyways, we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And if you haven't done so already, head over to our Patreon and check out our weekly podcast where we talk about various different topics in the reptile hobby. Every single dollar in Patreon fees goes towards a future snake purchase, and we can't wait to see you there.